Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Due to whiteout conditions, Alberta RCMP respond to more than 50 collisions on the QE2. Plus, Quebecers pay tribute to Brian Mulroney ahead of Saturday's state funeral. And a second day of protests ensues outside the Newfoundland and Labrador legislature by fishers wanting fewer restrictions on their catches.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. The whiteout conditions Alberta has experienced since Tuesday night has wreaked havoc on the roads and highways. On Wednesday alone, Alberta RCMP were kept busy responding to 52 collisions on the QE2 between Edmonton and Calgary, 3 of those resulting in injuries. Additional serious collisions have been reported throughout the province. With the snow continuing to fall, RCMP expect poor driving conditions to continue. RCMP wish to reiterate, if you don't have to travel, please stay home. And if you must travel, RCMP want to advise motorists to use extreme caution, slow down, and maintain an increased distance between yourself and other drivers. An estimated 30 centimeters is expected to fall in the Calgary area by Friday morning. Pallbearers carried former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney's casket into St. Patrick's Basilica today, where it will lie in repose. Mulroney, who died February 29th at the age of 84, was lying in state in Ottawa on Tuesday and Wednesday before his casket was driven to Montreal. Newfoundland and Labrador's government says it plans to deliver its budget despite a second day of protests outside the legislature involving fishers who want fewer regulations in the province's fishery. The day before, protesters forced the province to delay the budget presentation.
It's an emotional situation. Everything is on the line. Our lives, our businesses, our families, everything that we've worked for is on the line. And we're standing up in a parking lot outside a government building trying to get something done properly. We're not asking for the moon. We're just asking to be treated the same as everybody else is treated. Look, give us our freedom. Lift the regulations. What we're asking for is not outrageous. We're looking to be able to operate our businesses as businessmen. We're asking people just to respect our picket line. We were baited yesterday and we were incited yesterday by police horses that actually tried to force horses into a group of peaceful protesters. We were incited by a communications person from the Premier's office. Incited when you say a few words or when you try to go against the crowd, when people's frustration levels are up, when their emotions are up, they knew what they were doing to give us bad press, and they got the bad press yesterday. But I will correct it now. What happened here yesterday, the only unpeaceful time was when we were incited.
Lots of energy around her, and it's great to see that the workers in the building are working from home today, and that's so people are respecting it. And there's a poll online now. It seems like we got half and half support from the public, so that's really good because normally we have no support. So at least 50% is better than nothing. They said they agreed to all the terms, but they won't put it on paper. So I don't know how stupid he thinks the public are, but just put it on paper. If you agree to it, put it on paper so everyone can see it.
The minister responsible for democratic institutions, Dominic LeBlanc, spoke to reporters about newly tabled legislation that updates the Federal Elections Act. The government says the bill, which is part of the Liberal government's agreement with the NDP, would encourage voters' participation and help protect against foreign interference.
The Prime Minister, Mr. Singh, committed to expand options Canadians currently have to cast their ballots. And this bill seeks, amongst other measures, to add 2 more days of advance voting, to make the Vote on Campus program permanent, and take steps towards voting at any polling station in a voter's riding. The bill also proposes to offer dedicated on-site voting for voters living in long-term care homes and enhancements as well to the increasingly popular and accessible vote-by-mail process.
Defense Minister Bill Blair has tabled legislation to formally remove the military's ability to investigate and prosecute sex crimes. It's a change that was recommended in former Supreme Court Justice Louise Arbour's scathing 2021 report that called for dozens of changes to reform the military's toxic culture. The military started referring cases to the civilian justice system later that year, but only about half of the cases were actually taken on by police in the first 2 years.
Today, in Parliament, I had the honour to introduce legislation that proposes a suite of targeted amendments to reform military justice and to advance cultural change in the Canadian Armed Forces. First and most notably, in response to Madam Arbour's fifth recommendation, this legislation will definitively remove the Canadian Armed Forces jurisdiction to investigate and prosecute any criminal code sexual offence committed in Canada. And as Madam Arbour recommended, this proposed legislation would provide exclusive jurisdiction to civilian authorities to investigate and to prosecute such offences. We are seeking to expand access to victim liaison officers to individuals acting on behalf of a victim under the Declaration of Victims' Rights, and this work is being done in consultation with those who have been affected by sexual misconduct.
This is one step. It's an important step. It doesn't cover all of the issues that we've seen. It certainly doesn't also address a lot of the people who have been caught in the middle between the public justice system, the civilian justice system, and the military justice system. And it doesn't go back in time either. So it's not perfect, but I do believe it's a first step.
Immigration Minister Mark Miller announced that for the first time, Canada will set targets for the number of new temporary resident arrivals to the country. The federal government plans to decrease the number of temporary residents to 5% of the population over the next 3 years, down from the current 6.2%.
So starting this fall, for the first time, we will expand the immigration levels plan to include both temporary resident arrivals and permanent resident arrivals. The latter category is something, as you know, we are doing already. Recently, Canada's temporary resident volume has increased significantly, now reaching up to 2.5 million, or 6.2% of our population in 2023. Therefore, in our levels planning, we'll be including a target in order to reach an adequate volume of temporary residents that we can welcome. As a starting point, we are targeting a decrease in our temporary residents population to 5% over the next 3 years. This target will be, of course, finalized in the fall after consulting our provincial and territorial counterparts and as part of our annual levels planning. Canada will continue to benefit from the important contributions newcomers make each and every day to us. We want every new family and resident to be set up for the success and be able to access the services that they need.
Health Minister Mark Holland is promising a major crackdown on nicotine pouches, which he says are being marketed to children. Holland accuses Imperial Tobacco of exploiting a loophole to get Health Canada approval for its oral nicotine patch by branding it as an aid to quit smoking. But Imperial Tobacco says their product went through the normal Health Canada approval process.
Whatever dark corner the tobacco industry crawls and creeps into to go after our children, wherever they go, wherever they think, whatever loophole they think they can find, they will meet me like an iron wall. And so I'm saying through you to the tobacco company, if you do not hear in my voice the concrete nature of the action we will take to meet you, to stop you from going after our children, then you do not understand my determination. I am sick of it. I am absolutely sick of it. Watching and talking to parents dealing with sick children who've been addicted to these products, who've had their reward systems hijacked because they've got companies using their billions of dollars to addict them. It's done. And if you can find some new loophole, you're going to find me there waiting for you.
We went through a process of 2 years with his department, who approved Zonic as a cessation product, right? We've saw it. It's not the first time that Minister Holland comes out. It's funny because we've been talking to his department, who reminded us that we haven't done anything wrong. Minister Holland and other health groups have accused us of, for example, using lifestyle, using flavors, using colors. And what all these groups do not tell the public is that every NRT product and every cessation product in Canada is using colors and flavors and lifestyle to promote their product. We've offered to Health Canada whatever they feel is inappropriate, we will revise and we will change, right?
Alberta's Health Minister Adriana LaGrange is dismantling the province's Central Health Authority and replacing it with 4 agencies focused on different aspects of service, including acute care and primary care. LaGrange provided an update today on work to refocus the healthcare system and the next steps in creating a system to meet Albertans' needs. The province says the current system is not responding adequately to patients' needs.
To provide more opportunities to engage with service providers and experts who serve continuing care clients, the creation of the continuing care organization will be aligned with the primary care and acute care organizations in fall of 2024. While this is a change to our initial timeline of this spring, we have also said one of our guiding principles is to be flexible in the work we are doing. This adjustment will help strengthen integration and collaboration across all organizations to support patient care. Meetings with continuing care stakeholders are being planned for the coming months to support this change.
And Premier Danielle Smith named a new parliamentary secretary to assist Minister of Health Adriana LaGrange. Chelsea Petrovic, MLA for Livingston McLeod, who is also a licensed practical nurse with more than 13 years experience, was named Parliamentary Secretary for Health Workforce Engagement. And as reported earlier this week, the province is providing $10 million over the next 4 years to expand and support women's emergency shelters. Officials say currently $5 million is being distributed to 17 women's shelters to create more spaces for those who are fleeing violence. If Budget 24 passes, an additional $5 million will go towards those shelters over the next 5 years. Here to chat about this is YWCA Lethbridge and District CEO Jill Young. Jill, thanks so much for being here today. Now, does any of this allocated money from the province include Harbour House here in Lethbridge?
Here in Lethbridge, with our Harbour House Women's Emergency Shelter, we did have an ask in with the province for additional beds for and what we call as operational funding. So funding that will help support the operation of an additional 26 beds, actually. And so with that ask, unfortunately, we were not the recipients in this round of funding for the fiscal 2025. So it is disappointing for us. We recognize that there is a need in this city for women and women fleeing domestic violence. And so this is an extremely important cause, and YWCA Lethbridge is committed to the mission and serving our community to the best that we can. We are currently funded by the government of Alberta, and so we have received funding for our Harbour House for many decades at this point. So we will continue with the operation as is, but we were not, unfortunately, the recipients of this additional, as part of this additional $5 million.
Well, that is disappointing, as you mentioned there, Jill. But does Harbour House, I understand, currently has 24 beds. So if you were to receive more funding, where is it needed most right now?
Funding would go towards the direct operation and those costs that are associated with supporting the women and children that come to our shelter. So that includes food, bed, and staffing and resources that come with that support.
So as far as the funding being allocated, though, to other shelters around the province, that additional $5 million, what does this funding mean for women in this province, Jill?
This sector has not seen an increase in funding in more than 10 years. So this is an incredible win for the province as a whole to see some money begin to be infused into this sector. So even though Lethbridge was not a recipient, there are 17 communities across Alberta that are truly going to have a positive impact from this $5 million.
Well, that's fabulous. So with that said, how important is it that the province continue with this type of support?
We do need to see an investment, a continued and sustainable investment in this sector. And this $5 million is a step in the right direction, but we need to continue and ensure this momentum continues.
Jill Young, CEO of the YWCA Lethbridge and District, thanks so much for speaking with me today about this. Well, seeing pilots at an airport is a usual sight, but this Friday, if you're headed to the Calgary International Airport, you could see hundreds of WestJet pilots holding an informational picket. They plan to stand in solidarity to show management they remain committed to negotiating a contract that will ensure improved working conditions, wages, and career progression. This comes within just days of the possibility of WestJet pilots taking legal job action or facing a lockout. We'll bring you more information about this in the coming days. Well, if you live in the Yukon, you should consider yourself fortunate because according to a recent poll, you're at the top of the list of best places to live in Canada with the lowest unemployment rate and the highest annual investment in residential construction per 100,000 residents. Coming in at number 2 is Ontario, with British Columbia at number 3. Alberta was rated 7th, and in last place was Nunavut. The online gambling site called Lucky Days analyzed 7 varying factors to rank the luckiest place to live in Canada. Each province and territory were rated based on average life expectancy, hourly wage, population growth in the last 5 years, 2023 Consumer Price Index, unemployment rate, the rate of crime incidents per 100,000 people, and annual investment in residential construction per 100,000 residents. So there you go. Well, a snowfall warning continues across southern Alberta with total amounts of 10 to 30 centimeters expected by Friday morning. I'll have a full look at weather coming up right after the break. Welcome back. Well, a long period of snowfall continues across Alberta with a snowfall warning in effect for our region. We are expecting up to 30 centimeters of snow by Friday. Already areas from Banff through Cypress Hills have reported about 20 centimeters with another 10 expected tonight. As for Lethbridge, we are looking at 2 to 4 centimeters of snow tonight, another 2 centimeters tomorrow, -7 for a high, -6 on Saturday, still expecting snow to fall, and then light periods of snow on Sunday for -8, and then as it tapers out by Monday there with a mix of sun and cloud, high of 0, and then we're finally back up into the pluses there as we get into early next week. Tuesday looking at 1 degree and then up to 3 on Wednesday, which kind of puts us back into seasonal. I mean, we even though we have a lot of snowfall, we're still not in the very, very, very cold. We're still rather in the seasonal right there. So average high for this time of year 7, average low at -6, 21. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1939 and 2002. We were sitting at -31. 7:30 is when the sun rose this morning, right on the dot there, and the sunset this evening at 7:47. So we're seeing 12 hours and 17 minutes of daylight. Okay, as we look to the west coast tomorrow, we are seeing some rainy conditions. 40% chance of showers in Victoria tomorrow, 60% chance in Vancouver. 13 is the high for both of those cities. -6 for a high in Edmonton with mainly cloudy skies. Calgary only reporting light snowfall tomorrow with a high of -7. As we get into the rest of the prairies, though, we're seeing mainly clear skies across Saskatchewan. Saskatoon, however, still reporting those early morning very cold wind chill values, -28 wind chill in Saskatoon tomorrow with a risk of frostbite, -9 for a daytime high, -5 in Regina with clear skies, and -7 in Winnipeg with mainly clear skies there as well. We're seeing 2 to 4 centimeters of snow expected in Toronto tomorrow, -2 for a high, -3 in Ottawa, and -1 in Montreal tomorrow with clear skies. As we get into the Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, 0 for a high in Fredericton, high of 0 as well in Halifax. Halifax looking at a 30% chance of flurries, 30 to 50 winds in both Fredericton and Halifax, by the way, as well as Charlottetown, -1 for a daytime high in Charlottetown expected tomorrow, and also a 30% chance of flurries, and then looking at mainly clear skies in St. John's with a high of 2 tomorrow. So there you have it. That is your forecast. The Bank of Canada's Deputy Governor says the central bank expects quantitative tightening to end sometime in 2025. The Bank of Canada launched quantitative easing operations for the first time ever during the pandemic to indirectly drive down interest rates. The process involved buying government bonds from financial institutions using central bank money called settlement balances. Tony Gravel said in a speech in Toronto that once quantitative tightening ends, the central bank will resume its normal market operations, meaning it will purchase financial assets to reflect growth in cash circulating in the economy. About 30,000 employees in the federally regulated private sector will see their pay raise to $17.30 an hour on April 1st. The increase in the federal minimum wage from $16.65 reflects the increase in the annual average consumer price index for 2023. If the provincial or territorial minimum wage rate exceeds the federal rate, employers must pay the higher of the two. And now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 41 points to 22,087. The Dow was up 269 points to 39,781. The S&P 500 was up 16 points to 5,241. The Nasdaq was up 32 points to 16,401. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 50 cents to $80.77 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was even at $1.70 U.S. Gold was down $5.06 on the day to $2,181.33 U.S. an ounce. Silver was down 84 cents to $24.74 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is $8.30 per bushel. Barley is $6.42. Canola is $14.58. Corn is $7.57 per bushel. Live cattle were up 58 cents to $188.38. Feeder cattle were up 63 cents to $250.88. Lean hogs were down 40 cents to $84.90. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at $73.90 U.S.
Recapping one of our top stories, the whiteout conditions Alberta has experienced this week has wreaked havoc on the roads and highways. On Wednesday, Alberta RCMP reported 52 collisions on the QE2 between Edmonton and Calgary, and 3 of those were resulting in injuries. At least 30 centimeters is expected in the region by this weekend. Coming up after the break, we speak with the lead pastors of Parallel Church, Kelly and Joy Lynn Stickle, who give tips on how to keep the home fires burning in marital relationships. And when you see news happening in your community, be sure and send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of local stories and interviews.
You know, maybe people agree that marriage is a relationship ordained by God, but it can be tricky to keep that relationship thriving. Today's guests are going to help us do that. Kelly and Joy Lynn Stickle are a husband and wife team, and they are the lead pastors of Parallel Church right here in Lethbridge. Pastors Kelly and Joy Lynn, welcome back to Bridge City News. It's great to have you on today.
Thanks, that was great to be here.
Excellent. Now, I'm curious, how long have you two been married now?
28 years.
Wow.
Have to double check that, yeah.
Been a while.
To look at each other. So the romance sometimes can fade in marriage, and it's entirely possible that we may not even notice the signs. Why is that?
I think it's easy to just kind of do the motions, go through life, especially when things get busy and you have kids and the kids get busy and stuff. And so it's easy to kind of lose that and not see it happen unless you're intentional. I think intentional is a big part of marriage.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easy to drift. It's easy to have just the busyness of life kind of occupy or preoccupy what the focus is. So like Jordan said, is you have to be intentional in making effort to make sure that the marriage is priority over all of the distractions that can potentially come.
Yeah.
And once you notice the romance thermometer is dropping down, what steps should be taken to get the temperature back up again?
I think a big part of that, again, is the intentionality of making sure daily you're having connected time with one another, that whether that's a deep conversation or whatever, just to make sure that a priority daily. Weekly, it's great to go on dates and set aside an evening or time with each other.
Yeah.
We like to, quarterly, get away for a night or two, yearly go on a holiday that just the two of us away from the kids and distractions of life and kind of rekindle relationship that way. But again, it's intentionally saying, okay, we're going to put that in our calendar. We're going to make it a priority, make our marriage a priority, and focus on doing just that and put it in the calendar, not just saying we want to,
Yeah.
but actually put it in the calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the Bible says where your treasure is, your heart is there also. And so I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a physical treasure, but if you figure out what your spouse's love language is and how they feel loved and connected, then intentionally putting that treasure into your marriage, your heart will follow if it's kind of lagging behind. But yeah, I think it's easy, like we had said, it's easy to kind of get overwhelmed and just go through the motions. So just being intentional, putting it in your calendar is a big part of it.
Now let's talk about married couples for a bit here, because long ago I was married and didn't last very long, but I want to talk about like the honeymoon phase, because that can wear off sometimes. And I noticed that very early on into my marriage, I started noticing things like, oh, like she's snoring louder than she normally does, or like has her morning breath always been that pungent? So what are some steps to stay in that honeymoon phase or keep it going longer?
I think the honeymoon stage is often what we classify as the feelings of love, that feeling part of love, which is there, and it's a real thing. But love is much deeper than just the emotions that we feel on a time. And so when we get familiar with someone and we get to know them, we get to see the real them. Sometimes the feelings aren't there, but what Paul describes love in 1 Corinthians 13 is like, love is patient. Well, I don't remember the last time I had the feeling of being patient. It's not a feeling driven thing at all. And love is kind. Love is doesn't envy. Love is keeps no record of wrongs. None of what he lists in 1 Corinthians 13 is based on feelings. So there are decisions that we have to make on a daily basis and push beyond the feelings, the emotions, the triggers, all those things, and just say no, despite the nuances of being imperfect people with one another, that we're going to push beyond that and choose to love, choose to be kind, choose to be patient, choose to be keep no records of wrong, and make those choices every day.
Yeah. And I think it's important to recognize that, especially however long we've been married, you're always growing as a person, or you should be always growing as a person, and your spouse is always growing as a person. So if you are stuck in who they were when you were dating, and not allowing them the chance to grow and the growing pains that go with that, then you're taking away a lot of what real life is. And the beauty of being in a partnership like a marriage is that you get to grow each other, and you get to iron sharpens each other, right?
Right.
And it's a cool thing to just give them the space and give yourself the space to become who you're becoming. And that is hard sometimes, right?
Yes.
Now, obviously, it's important for couples to communicate in some fashion that you love and appreciate one another. I mean, I've heard some guys say like, well, I told you when I met you I love you, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. Obviously, that's not healthy. So any suggestions on how we can do this and how often we need to show our love and appreciation?
Love languages.
Yes.
Yeah. I think you should be the biggest cheerleader for your spouse, and you should be the biggest student of your spouse. And so figuring out who they are and how they feel love, and and show them that way, because they're going to feel it better that way. So with the love languages, like mine are words of affirmation. Mine are most of them, but he says I'm either easy to love or hard to love, because I'll take it all. But I'm easy to love, right?
Yes, very easy.
So words of affirmation, if he doesn't as much get that, or feel loved by that, he feels loved more by the acts of service and stuff. So if I'm constantly just gushing on him with words, but don't do anything for him, he's not going to feel that as much. And so again, being intentional, being the student of your spouse and making it your priority to study who they are and how they feel loved is a big part of it.
And if couples haven't read that book, The 5 Love Languages, it's a must for every marriage. And the natural tendency for all of us is, like Joylyn said, is to give what we receive naturally ourselves, is to give that back. But that's not necessarily the language that our spouse receives. And so we need to be able to speak their language over our own preferences and give preference to what they need most, and do that on a daily basis. Like that's not something that you let slide for a while and say at the altar and never say again. like it's a daily practice of making sure that they feel loved and cherished, and our priorities over anyone and everyone else.
Yeah.
I agree what you said about the 5 love languages, because it's amazing that that book has really gained popularity even in non-faith relationships. In fact, being on dating apps, I've noticed a lot of people are even asking what their love languages, asking each other what their love languages are, or saying these are my love languages, or they're sharing their Myers-Briggs. But what really fascinated me was they are talking about love languages. So I think that's really fascinating that something that came from a Christian author is really so popular amongst all kinds of relationships here. Now, I've also noticed that marriage experts encourage couples to find things that they both enjoy and to do those things together. But that can be tough to find time with kids and work, etc. So how do you find time?
I don't think you ever find time. I think you have to make time.
You claim time.
You claim time. And I think you have to make it a priority and saying, okay, well, if we just wait to find time, life's going to eat that up really quick. I think you have to be intentional and make the time, and pay attention rather than just get distracted or what grabs your attention. Pay attention, make the effort to pay attention to your spouse, make the time to be together and to do things that you enjoy together.
And I think it's super healthy for kids to see a strong relationship between parents and to not be the center of attention. So they're going to go into stronger relationships when they're older if they've seen it demonstrated throughout their life, and they've seen dad prioritize mom over them sometimes too, right? And vice versa. And so you're helping your children by showing them how a good relationship works and that mom and dad are prioritized, and that gives them security as well, to know that that they're secure in the family.
Now, today's couples typically watch a lot of TV programs together, and there's a lot of binge-worthy content out there. But they can also get influenced by social media, and this can portray a somewhat unrealistic view of what a husband or wife should look like and how they should behave. Do we need to adjust our marriage expectations?
Absolutely. I think social media has probably done a greater disservice, I think, than even television lately.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times what we do, we walk right into the comparison trap where we begin to compare our behind the scenes to somebody's highlight reels. And we have to recognize that what is portrayed on social media is somebody's highlight reels. You're not seeing behind the scenes. You're not seeing all the messes and the messiness of life that is real.
Yep.
And so it's dangerous to watch somebody on social media or watch a marriage on social media and going, oh, I wish my husband was like, or I wish my wife was more like, or I wish our marriage was like that. A very dangerous thing to do, to walk into that comparison trap. And it puts undue expectations on yourself, but undue expectations on your spouse, and recognize, hey, our marriage is different than anybody else's, but this is our marriage. We don't, this is our relationship. This is our personalities coming together to becoming one. And it's not going to look like everybody else's.
And over time, we can start to get critical of one another, especially like if we're seeing the same person every single day, day in, day out, every day, every weekend. How can couples break that cycle of negative communication?
In the art of communication, like psychologists will talk about changing the story in your head. And oftentimes like, we go in with a preconceived, especially to those that we're closest with, we go into a preconceived idea of, oh, they did that on purpose, or they're trying to, and we ended up getting critical because they forgot this again, or there's just like them, this. And psychologists say, change the story in your head. And like Joylyn said, is hey, when we were in love, when we got married, why would somebody who loves me so much promise, their lives to with mine, why would they intentionally try to hurt me? If I can change the story, they're not intentionally trying to hurt me, and just simply changing the story in my own head is going to allow me to enter into the communication with not defensiveness, not angst. It's going to allow me to enter the conversation with, hey, being open and saying, hey, this hurt me. I felt this, and I know you didn't mean it, but I felt this, and it becomes a lot easier to have a conversation than going in accusatory.
Yeah.
And as unique and wonderful as we all are, that means we are all wired slightly differently, which can lead to some conflict. So once an argument starts, what advice do you have on how to fight fair?
Well, some of the advice that I use and we use and that we counsel other couples in is to avoid starting an argument with an accusation. So avoid starting an argument with you always. We typically say things like, you're always late, or you never do this for me, or whatever. And we encourage people to not use the words always and never, because they're never true, and to not start a discussion with an accusation with you. Instead, begin the discussion with, or turn the discussion with, hey, I feel when this happened, when you didn't show up on time, when I expected, I felt disappointed, or I felt this. And it's very difficult. People do it, but it's very difficult to argue with someone's feelings. And it's more like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, I'm sorry. We end up typically going into a more of having a conversation about the real issues, rather than arguing over, well, I was on time. You're always late. No, I was on time 3 weeks ago. We start nitpicking over the little details, and the argument goes way off the rails, and becomes accusatory. So our natural response when somebody accuses us is to get defensive, and then we fight back. But if somebody begins the conversation with, I feel, it's, I'm not feeling like I need to get defensive, and I'm not feeling like I need to go on an attack mode. I want to have now the conversation and get to the real heart of the issue.
Yeah. And you need to make space for grace in your marriage, in yourself, and in others, right? And it's just the grace that we get from God. We need to be thankful for that and extend it to others.
I love that. Make space for grace. And how important is it to sincerely apologize for the wrongs and to forgive one another and leave the past in the past?
Very important, I think, just with anybody, right? Like you hear it said that unforgiveness hurts you more than anyone else. But when you're in a tight marriage and a partnership, it's going to hurt anybody around you. And the shrapnel from that is going to just continue to hurt people. And so it's important for your own health. It's important for your marriage and your family and any dynamic around you to forgive and just to move on and work through things. Definitely, if there's things that need to be worked through, and let go of things that just need to be forgiven and moved past.
And what about making time for date nights? Is that still something that should happen regularly, even if you have a tight budget? I know a lot of people are cutting back on things, and I think their recreation and their pleasure time is really taking a hit these days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's ways. A lot of the excuses or a lot of the reasons are children, and I think there's ways to like babysit, share. I guess having friends that have little kids and say, okay, this week you have all the kids, and this week I'll have all the kids, and figure out ways to take care of your kids, and figure out ways it doesn't have to cost. We have lots of date nights at home. and we enjoy those, and it costs a lot less. And yeah.
And I think if you take money out of the equation, it allows you to become a lot more creative,
Yeah.
which becomes a lot more fun as to what you're going to be able to do. And saying, well, hey, let's what can we do without spending money, or even what we like to do is put into budget date nights and saying it's going to be a regular part of our finances and putting into our budget so that we're not bracing and going, well, we can't afford to,
Yeah, and
we
then it's
can't do
not as
that.
fun.
Then it's not as fun. Then you're feeling the pressure of
Yeah.
the finances as well, which takes away from the whole purpose of the night anyway. So
Yeah. Well, and then you're prioritizing again. In your budget, you might need to cut back on different things, but you're like, that's important because I get my date night with my husband, and that's going to be long-term importance.
Yeah.
Kelly and Joylyn Stickle are the lead pastors of Parallel Church in Lethbridge. Kelly and Joylyn, thanks so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Well, from alcohol and drug addictions to life's hurts and pains, the reality is most of us know someone, whether it's a friend, a coworker, a relative, or anyone who struggles with this. Some do find help through the medical system, some never find help at all, and others find a spiritual solution. Joining us from Lethbridge to discuss this is Patty Bidevat, ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery. Patty, welcome to Bridge City News. Great to have you on today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this.
Absolutely. Okay, so maybe give us a bit of an overview of what Celebrate Recovery is all about.
Well, Celebrate Recovery is about finding freedom from our hurts, hangups, and habits of any kind. Most of us in life have been hurt in some way or another. And some people think that this is just for people with addictions, but it really truly isn't. We've all had hurts or hurt somebody at some point. And so we get freedom through Christ, and this is long-lasting true freedom.
Okay, and you meet in Lethbridge, right? So where and when do you guys meet?
We meet on Friday evenings at 7 p.m. at the Park Meadows Baptist Church, and the last Friday of the month, though, we start at 6 o'clock because we have a pizza supper, and then it's a special Friday evening that it's a celebration. So Celebrate Recovery, we celebrate.
Okay, now you mentioned the church there. Now, are people who aren't involved in any church or even non-Christians welcome to attend as well?
Everyone is welcome to attend. We welcome with open arms anybody, and we are glad to see new faces, and it is growing. It is ministering to Christians or non-Christians, and it's a great program for absolutely everyone, men and women, anybody above the age of 18.
Wow. Okay. And so you say that the program, it's not just for people who are struggling with drug and alcohol, but for a wide variety of hurts, right? Or habits or hangups. How do you help those people? Maybe explain that a little bit.
Absolutely. It is for a wide variety of hurts, hangups, or habits. Some people have issues with codependency, or maybe there might be other addictions like shopping addiction or food addiction, or just simply been hurt and are struggling with maybe some anxiety or depression, and just need some support from a loving group of people that love God and love each other and just want to help one another in finding this true freedom. And this is it's a part of what God has brought into my life and many people's lives around the world. And so it's for absolutely anybody.
Yeah. And a lot of those hangups sound like things that many of us can relate to. as well. I mean, we all get anxiety at sometimes, the shopping addiction, I can totally
Yeah.
relate to that as well. And
Yes.
yeah, I'm sure you see it in various degrees to the point where people
Yes.
need help. So it's almost like a 12-step program though, right? Where kind of similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. So what would the key differences be?
Well, it is very similar to the 12-step program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have not been involved with Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm not familiar at all. But from what I've heard, and that's where it originated, John Baker from California was very involved. He's passed away last year, but he started at Alcoholics Anonymous, and then he was wanting to do something that was Christ centered. And so he talked to the pastor of his church, Rick Warren, and that's where it all started. Rick Warren just said, "Okay, this is your ministry, go with it." And so it's biblical based. The 12 steps approach is from the Beatitudes, from the book of Matthew. And so it's very, set up the similar to Alcoholics Anonymous. We also have 8 principles. Uh, and so it's really set up well according to how God wants us to be able to truly find freedom, and not as the world sees it. But it's great.
It's interesting that it was started by the same person who started Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA, as it's more commonly known. And it sounds almost like he wanted to kind of make it a little bit more spiritual. Like AA is spiritual. They talk about your higher power, but it sounds more like he really wanted to hone in on that sort of Christian angle. Is that kind of what I'm getting from that?
Yes,
Mhm.
exactly. He went to church there at Saddleback in California, and there was no Christ-based program to help people with addictions, and he had an addiction, and so he was searching, and so then he wrote up this. Uh, yeah, a paper to the pastor wanting to start a ministry. And Rick Warren just said, go with it. It's blessed by God. And it's in every country around the world. It's a huge ministry, and it is really, truly helping many, many people. And me personally, it has helped me, as I have been hurt in my past. And so I came just, seeking help, because I was struggling with some anxiety and depression. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess you turn around and now you're leading that group, right?
Yes.
That's
Yes.
amazing. So what kinds of
What?
things would take place in a typical meeting? Maybe walk us through that a little bit.
Right. So at the beginning of the meeting, we have two main parts, and then at the end we can just get together for coffee and snacks at the very end after 9 o'clock. But the first hour between 7 and 8 o'clock is a large group, and people come and we sing some worship songs, and we go through and say the either the 12 principles or the 8 steps, and we listen to either one week we listen to a lesson by Johnny Baker or somebody else. Um, Sometimes it's online, but that's how that is taught. But every other week, then we do a testimony, and we are trying actually to once a month have a live testimony. So some of our leaders have written up their testimonies, and we'll share them in person, which is very powerful.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
so that's great. But otherwise, we have testimonies that we have access to online. And so the large group will meet and listen to that. Then the men and the women between 8 o'clock and 9 o'clock divide into separate groups, men and women. And then they are welcome to openly share something that touched them about the testimony, or what was important that they could glean from the lesson, and just digging deeper. And also then there's a time of prayer where we can pray for one another. So it's such a blessed evening, and it's such amazing people coming together to um, just support one
Are
another. And
people required to share their own struggles at these meetings, or is it more of a like when you see fit, you can open up about it, you can sit there and just take it all in, you don't have to necessarily share?
right. At the beginning, many of us are nervous to share, and so there is no requirement to share at all. Only when you are ready, you can share, and where God leads and how He leads. And yeah, at the beginning, a lot of people don't share, and that's okay. Come and listen. Come and just be a part. Build relationships. Connect with other women or men, and just yeah, over time,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
as the
just
heart leads.
curious, when people are addicted to a substance, or if they have a lot of that hurt that they're holding on to, how long does it take to recover from that? I know it would vary definitely from person to person, but is there kind of an average timeline that you're looking at?
Well, I'm not sure about an average timeline because a lot of people's addictions are different. We are not counselors, or we don't do counselor referrals, but some people do come after they've been either in a treatment, or sometimes they come before they've been in treatment and then they realize that maybe they should go for treatment. So it definitely varies. I don't know if there is a an average time line, but for every person, it all depends on how serious you are and how diligent you want to dig into your
Sure. Yeah,
healing
no, that makes
and
sense.
your journey.
Are there any particular keys to breaking an addiction?
Um, there is ultimately giving it to God. God really leads, and so that's a huge thing. Connecting with other people that attend and finding that support when you are struggling. We freely can share our cell phone numbers, or communicate with people on Friday nights. After the Friday nights, um, the men have started something on a separate night called Step Studies, which digs deeper through some actual work and whatnot. And it's usually about a year long. The women are going to be starting shortly for these step studies. And so it's a separate day of the week. And you dig deeper, but you also connect more deeper on those during those step studies. So that's a separate, other than Friday nights. And so that, depending on how deep a person and how diligently a person is working on that, will be how quickly and how soon you will find that some true freedom.
Sure. And of course, we are human beings, and obviously, people have relapses. So, what happens when a person relapses? What's the plan for that, and how often does that tend to happen?
For every person, it's different, and a relapse can happen sometimes even at the beginning, one every other week or every week or whatever. Sometimes, whatever, like it can happen, and there is some of the lessons are geared to relapse. So there is one of the lessons called relapse, and it really helps us be aware that relapse is possible, and if it does happen, what we can do. And what we can do is just keep going. Pick up your bootstraps, like don't um, stop your healing journey. And that's when we truly need to lean into our fellow Celebrate Recovery people, our and really just talk to them and just be open and honest. And there is no shame in coming back whatsoever. We are just glad that people will come back after relapse, and that we know they will continue. And that's the blessing of seeing that, where somebody has relapsed and they just keep then walking the journey.
Yeah, I mean, we often hear that sometimes our social circles can shape us. So, with that said, how important is it for someone who wants to break that cycle of addiction to form some new social networks, get some new friends? Is that almost key?
It is. It is very much key, because when you've been very entrenched, maybe in a deep addiction, your social circles are people that are also commonly in addiction and in that same addiction. And so, therefore, we really encourage people to connect and stay connected with friends that they meet at Celebrate Recovery, and communicate once a week or more often if needed, so that they can keep going. And yeah, they will probably see that they will connect more and more with their new friends, and that's what we encourage, and encourage, as they would like to maybe go to church, and meet people there. But yes, building new friendships.
Right. And then once again, just to remind our viewers, you meet at 7 p.m. on Fridays, right? In
Yes, we
Lethbridge,
meet.
anyways. Where is that?
Yes, we meet at 7 p.m. In Lethbridge at the Park Meadows Baptist Church. There is another church that is also supporting along the way, and has other people involved that have come from that church, and that's Parallel, also in Lethbridge, which has been great. We've got some great support there too. So yes, it is at 7 p.m. at Park Meadows Baptist Church every Friday.
Okay, and I would imagine if somebody does not live in Lethbridge, our viewers in Ontario or wherever, they can check with their local churches to see who offers a Celebrate Recovery program.
Yes, they would be able to look online and be able to find a location near them.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
It looks like we're out of time here, Patty, but thanks so much for being with us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for highlighting this awesome ministry, what God has done. Yeah, He's just continuing.
Patty Bidevat is a ministry leader with Celebrate Recovery. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks so much for watching.